Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Brian, I'm going to give you one more minute just to say this.
Earlier, however, on Air Force One, right when our time was up and the interview was supposed to end, the president asked to keep going. He ran through what's become his pitch, his list of principles in the current campaign ad that's airing. But then he also wanted to address how this all must look from the outside.
It's funny, one of the things about being on the campaign trail, you're in Air Force One, you're in Marine One, you're these big motorcades. Michelle jokes that I've got everything but a caboose and a dog sled behind me wherever I'm driving. None of that is the presidency. The presidency is all about who's going to fight for the American people every single day, even when you've got to make tough decisions that are unpopular because you have some compass about what this country can be. And I've, during the course of these 4 years, there are all kinds of mistakes that I've made every single day. But my compass has been true, and I've focused on what's going to be best for the American people.
That was how Brian Williams' Rock Center interview with President Obama ended yesterday. After spending 2 days with Brian Williams, the president asked for one more minute with his interviewer, which he never does. He said he wanted to say one more thing. It was that compass idea that President Obama went out of his way to make sure he said there. The idea of the president having a compass that is true. That is basically the idea of character, of integrity. It's the idea of personal authenticity to an extent. That you know what a person stands for. That you know that person will stand for those things even when it's hard because it is who they truly are. This is more than just being likable. This is the idea of personal substance, that you can be counted on to do the right thing because you are who you say you are. You are not acting. This is a sort of intangible currency that campaigns are always competing for at every level. But it's particularly so at the end of big races, where the people who haven't been persuaded by the more overt arguments and policy differences are the ones who are going to make the final decision. At the end of the day, people who have no other reason to vote one way or the other will vote for the person they believe in. The person they trust isn't pulling one over on them. And, that's what the birtherism thing is about on the right. They keep with that stupid thing because it translates to the president being secretly not what he seems, right? I mean, at the end of this campaign, the trust issue is also what the Obama campaign is pressing about Mitt Romney. Not in some sort of creepy, pseudo-racist birther way, but more directly just asking people to question whether you really believe this guy stands for anything, whether he seems authentic to you, whether you really trust that he believes what he says. Now, they don't get much credit for it, but the Obama-Biden ticket's secret weapon on the issue of authenticity and integrity and unimpeachably being who you purport to be, their secret weapon in that class of political combat has always been Vice President Joe Biden. The right has tried to make Vice President Biden into a caricature and a joke, but it is instructive, I think, that he was able to diffuse that totally at the vice presidential debate when he said, yeah, sure, make fun of me all you want, but I always say what I mean, which, in fact, nobody can dispute. I mean, Joe Biden really does always say what he means. And when Joe Biden really says what he means, when he really lets loose, it can be a very powerful thing. Watch.
People say to me now, and I wonder now, whatever gave you the courage as a 29-year-old kid to announce to the United States Senate against a man who had an 82% favorable rating in a year when we knew it was going to be tough? What gave you the courage to run? Or some thought, what made you so foolhardy? The answer, and you girls should know this, was your father. Your father. I didn't know him when I announced for the Senate, but I honest to God believed that I could maybe go help him end this war. I honest to God believed that. Where people don't realize, had your father not been there, had your father never been in the Senate, so much more blood, so much more treasure would have been wasted. The war would have never ended when it did. It would have never ended how it did. Your father gave courage to people who didn't have the courage to speak up, to finally stand up. Your father stood there and took all of that beating. Your father, who was characterized by these right-wing guys as a coward and unwilling to fight. Your father was a genuine hero. The irony used to make me so angry that your father would never speak up and talk about his heroism. Your father had more courage, and physical courage, his little finger. And 95% of those guys who continued to fight a war we shouldn't have fought in the first place. But because he took such a miserable beating, he actually, even though he didn't win that election, he won the end of the war. It would have never happened.
That was Vice President Joe Biden offering the eulogy last night for Senator George McGovern, who was a war hero and an anti-war stalwart, and who was the Democratic Party's presidential nominee in 1972. George McGovern died this past weekend at the age of 90. Vice President Biden there not only doing right by the memory of Senator McGovern, but in so doing, showing what has been central to his political career, which is being able to tell incredibly powerful and accessible stories that connect human beings to values and to big political ideas. That is what Joe Biden has always done as a politician, and it is what he does now on this campaign, as this campaign becomes more and more every day about that challenge, that compass, that issue of authenticity and values. Now it's time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Have a great weekend. Good night.